Welcome, everybody, to Believe in Advocacy Across Cultures, Deconstructing Norms. I'm so excited for this panel. If at any time during this panel you have questions, please add it in the chat box on Hopin. If you feel like you're in crisis, please email our teamscene@padb.org email to be connected with one of our care bears. Our care bears can take care of you and give you the resources you need. I am so excited today to welcome our speakers for this panel, Aparna and Lavanya from Raksha, and Aisha may be joining us later on. The joys of being a mother, things come up, so she hopefully will be able to hop on and join us. But I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera, and ladies, go ahead and take it away. You have the floor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you're doing well. And I think, Lavanya, we're here to talk about believing in advocacy across cultures and understanding the cultural differences in dating violence. Lavanya, I know you're going to start us off, right, with some introductions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aparna. It's so good to be here. I know this is going to be a heavy topic for us because we are talking of teens itself is such a challenging time. Dating is also equally challenging and complex. And of course, when you add violence to it, there is so much that comes up. But for now, let's try and do some breathing. I would really encourage all of you all to just settle into your chair. Let the chair take your weight. You can gently close your eyes if you feel like it. This is a very simple meditation intended to calm our mind. And so just let's follow our breathing and anchor in any word that you feel will give you calm, strength, and perhaps a little bit feeling collected. Yeah? So gently close your eyes and take a deep breath and exhale. Let's do that 2 more times. Let's take a deep breath and let go. Thank you. We will encourage you if there is a time in the slides that it throws up difficult emotions and you need to take care of yourself. Feel free to perhaps log out and you can log in back. Take whatever it needs to make yourself feel settled into this presentation. Thank you, Aparna. You can.
Thank you. Well, before we start, let's, Lavanya and I are both, we'll tell you more about the organization later, but before we start, let's do a quick poll. So what cultures do you identify with? And hopefully the poll is coming up. And Lavanya, I can't see the poll, so if you can let us know what is coming up in the poll.
Yes.
Or even the chat, because I can't see any of this right now.
Chat, I don't see any comments right now. Yeah.
And is there any?
So I think it would be best to put this in the chat. The poll gives you only a limited amount of options, so select one. So everybody, if you're watching, please drop something in the chat. Again, the question was, what cultures do you identify with?
And like Jenna said, it might be something totally different. So maybe you identify as LGBTQ, maybe you identify with your faith. So please share with us the different cultural identities that you feel strongly about. If you feel strongly sharing them. Okay, so we've got Black American, Christian. Thank you, Vera. No other identities? Okay, Jamaican, Black woman. Awesome.
So let me go ahead and tell you about the complex things that I identify myself with. I identify myself as a woman, a South Asian, South Indian, belonging to a particular minority community. So many things at the same time.
And Lavanya, I'm going to join in, and I identify as a, of course, an Indian who's from West Bengal, but I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So I still see myself as, American and a Southerner, and Atlanta first, of course. And that's an important part of my identity, having grown up here. So I think, yeah, there's complexities to how we identify our culture. I was raised culturally Hindu. And yeah, I think that's a little bit about how I identify, and it can come across, in many different ways. And as we're talking about this, we know that we're not experts in all cultures. We're going to talk about our experiences and working with South Asian communities and our experiences in doing this work. So we're not proclaiming to be the experts by any way. And if you know anything about culture, it is ever evolving and ever changing. So even if we were to tell you things about one culture, we know that it's constantly changing. All righty. So as we move on, yes, Lavanya, did you want to add something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So today's objectives are to talk about culturally competency basics. And I know that there's different words that people use around cultural competency. You could also say cultural humility. You could also say cultural responsiveness. And I know that that's, again, another term that's evolving. Thinking about factors to consider when we're talking about abuse in different cultural communities. And then what are some culturally informed ways that we can help or be a better ally to a culture that we're not a part of? So if we're talking about Raksha means protection in many languages. And our mission is to promote a stronger and healthier South Asian community through confidential support services, education, and advocacy. At the end of the day, we really want to support survivors in healing, empowerment, and justice. So the services that we provide include multilingual and multicultural counseling and support groups. We provide training and technical assistance to many service providers throughout Georgia and nationally on working with immigrant survivors. We do individual and systemic advocacy, and we do workshops within the South Asian community and other communities. And again, as we said, we're working towards healing, empowerment, and justice for survivors. Again, we've been around since 1995. It's our 25th year. And if you don't know what South Asia is, it is not limited to, but includes Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. But we know that the South Asian community has also immigrated and been taken to other countries like Africa, the Caribbean. So our presence is in many different places. The languages that we speak include Bangla, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Punjabi, Tamil, Telugu, Urdu, English, and I'm sure Lavanya can add in even more languages that she may speak. But we have many, many languages that are part of our country and part of South Asia. Lavanya, were you going to add something?
We can park some of these things for discussion later because it's so rich.
Yes, definitely. But because we're an organization that works for the entire community, we have had survivors from other communities such as Afghanistan, Somalia, Cameroon. We work with adults, children, and teens, and a lot of our work is also at the intersections of dealing with immigration. We are not a 24-hour hotline. A lot of our services are based, are community-based, and we provide a number of services, but we don't yet have the capacity to be a 24-hour hotline, and we depend on our partners such as PADV to help us with meeting those crises. So what is culture? Do y'all want to add in text? I mean, culture is complex. It's our race, and I know we've been talking about race lately, ethnicity, our national origin, our sexual identity, Now, sexual orientation, gender identity, our religion, our age as teens. I'm sure that there's a whole different lingo and language that you use, especially when you're texting, all those acronyms that we have to always translate. There's class, whether you're rich, poor, working class. There's whether you have a disability or whether you have an ability. Whether you're deaf and hard of hearing, your immigration status, what type of language you speak, whether you have education or, have not had access to education, whether you're from imagine if you're from South or Atlanta versus the rest of Georgia, your sense of time, whether you're always on time or whether you like to be very casual time. I know a lot of our cultures that are represented here have jokes about or acronyms about, like we say Indian Standard Time, which means we might be running late, but we still have a lot of Indians who are very much on time. And then we think about our experience. We have a family culture, right? And yes, there can be cultures within those that we have listed. So culture is, this is just kind of what we talk about, but there's many cultures within even those cultures. So it's very complex. And even within each of those areas, there's a lot of differences. And then there's a context of historical oppression that may impact how we interact with individuals or different communities and how we show up in the world. Hopefully that makes sense. So
absolutely. And just to add a little bit to it, I think the fact that I can say that of the context with the place that I came from, India, has had a historical a history of being colonized, and a lot of the laws that are practiced in that land is also the laws that the British imposed. And I think this will come up in the discussion later on. The fact that we are an organization that really serves the South Asian population, there are very unique cultural components that come into play even here in the US, especially with respect to, say, LGBTQ rights, with just the understanding of how historically we have been treated in terms of the color, in terms of gender, in terms of caste as well. And so that all feeds into making us who we are, and also navigating the complex choices that surrounds us. Yeah.
And Lavanya, just for folks who may not know, caste is there's levels of hierarchy within Hinduism, and there's been some books lately that are talking about caste, which can be very similar to class and racism. That's very prevalent within South Asia, in case folks are not aware of that. But I think, when we talk about historical oppression, thinking about being African American or Black identified in the South, that's a historical context of oppression of how we may be responding. And as we're talking about many things like Black Lives Matter, all that comes into play based on our region, the identity, and how folks show up.
Absolutely.
So culture is always changing. It also depends on where you are. Like we said, like being South Asian in India, being in India might be very different than being here in the United States. And it may, I think one thing about context is like, thinking about where you are. So when we talk about eye contact, one great thing to keep in mind is that in the American culture, making eye contact is so important, but yet in Asian culture, it might be considered disrespectful to make direct eye contact. So again, it's all about, even, I think one of the things I always talk about is if you point with the finger, Americans point with, which is this finger right here, that's considered disrespectful in other cultures. So it's really important to really keep in mind that culture is about context, and what might be real for you might have a very different context for somebody else in another culture. And to also know that our views about different cultures is often based on what we've learned in media, what we've learned in our families, what's been passed down to us in the places where we get our information. So while it may not be true, for somebody else, it might be based, like thinking about how media might influence us. There's a lot of feedback, so I don't know if we might need to mute when we're not speaking, just to keep that in mind. So I know Aisha's joined us, and I don't know if Aisha wants to talk about this in particular. I see that she joined in the session, but I'm not sure if she has access. But one of the things that we talk about different cultures is individual versus collectivist cultures. And so one of the things I can say for me growing up is that there's this view that we value as Americans that independence and individuality. With my Indian mom, I don't know that that would always have been something that would be key and critical. That would be seen as being selfish and not thinking about the family. So the focus on the individual needs versus the family needs. The parent's role is to keep the judgment. And I think the way that it may play out, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. And I'm wondering if folks can mute because we are getting a lot of feedback. So when we talk about collectivist cultures, thinking about prioritizing the need of the family over an individual. So if someone is dating outside of their culture, or they're not supposed to be dating, let's say, and the family's upset about it, part of the view could be that this is going to impact the future marriage of somebody else in your family. So I can tell you one of the things in working with the South Asian community is that if someone is asking to get a divorce, the pressure they may get from their family is that, oh my goodness, this is going to impact the marriage of your younger sister. So please, please don't do this. Don't get a divorce because now your younger sister may not be able to get married. So that's a great example of how a collectivist culture, we talk about what we do can impact the honor of our family. It could impact how our family sees us. And it is a lot of pressure, yeah. So I think that's why it makes it difficult for a lot of young folks who may come from different cultures to be able to be their whole selves, or to be able to talk about dating, or to be able to not worry about how everybody else is going to see them. So we're going to do a quick quiz, and I don't know that we have the poll set up, but you can go ahead and answer in the chat. Dealing with domestic and sexual violence with immigrants is harder because it's part of their culture and it's culturally acceptable. True or false? Somebody said false. Okay. Thank you, Tina, for responding. Okay, I see a couple of falses. Somebody says true. So what I want to kind of add into this one is that when we talk about something being culturally acceptable, I'd like to say, and I'm going to put this out there and you may disagree with me, is that domestic and sexual violence is part of all of our cultures, not just immigrant cultures. Now, what may work with what may make it difficult with immigrants might be language access, immigration realities. But when we're talking about it being about their culture and domestic violence and sexual violence being a part of their culture, I think we're missing the whole thing that domestic and sexual violence is a part of every culture. There's a culture of violence that happens in all of our communities. And even though we may have laws and we may have all these resources, it's important for us to realize that we have a culture of violence, and the fact that we have shelters and the fact that we have laws still means it's part of our culture. So I think it's just something I'd love for y'all to consider, that a lot of times we want to other cultures and say it's part of their culture, but it's very much a part of every culture. It just may play out differently. We may have different laws and different resources, but it is prevalent in every culture. Sexual assault and domestic violence are not part of the US culture. I kind of answered that question, didn't I? Sorry about that. How many of you have heard of honor violence? So honor violence is different from domestic violence homicides. Is that true or false? Okay, some people say false. I believe I haven't heard of. Okay, so honor violence is this concept that if you dishonor one's family, that the family can do what it takes to regain their honor. Some people say false. Okay. And what I'd like to kind of have you think about is when we talk about honor violence, how many of you know about power and control, right? So power and control is the tenet of domestic and dating violence, right? And so when we think about it, it's about power and control. You haven't worn what I told you to wear. And as a result, I have permission to, not that you really have permission, but folks feel entitled to be violent towards their partner in a dating violence situation. When we talk about honor violence, it's a very similar concept. It is about power and control. You're not following the rules. And so as a result of not following the rules, that I am using my power to control you yet again. So to me, it goes, if there is an honor violence or a homicide that occurs as a result of honor violence, then to me, it is the same as domestic violence homicides because it is about power and control. Abuse by in-laws only happens in other cultures. True or false? And I'm sorry if I'm looking to the side, it's because I'm checking the chat. False. False, false, false. Yes. I know a lot of times we talk about it and it's very much shown in many of the South Asian like television shows, but it is very true. Even it happens here in the United States. And a lot of times we tend to say it's part of our culture, but it's part of every culture. So when we talk about cultural competency, you know, it's about cultural knowledge, cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity. So cultural knowledge is simply about knowing about the culture. Cultural awareness is kind of putting that, kind of like, I'm aware that this is happening and you're not putting as much of a judgment on it. And I think with sensitivity, it's really about kind of how do I show up? Cultural sensitivity is not putting a value. And then the awareness is kind of like being open to the idea that it's okay for things to be different. And then we talk about cultural competence. The way I best look at cultural competence is taking all that information you have and putting it into practice, right? How do we interact with the people that we know? How do we show up without putting judgment on them? So when we talk about cultural competency, it's that we have an appreciation for things that might be different, and that all cultures have mutual appreciation for kindness and respect. And to know that there's variations even in things that we hear about one culture that, you know, I think one of the things is like things that are commonly talked about Indian communities is that girls are not appreciated, right? And it's not good. It's seen as negative to have a girl child. And then I think about where I grew up. I made this assumption hearing that this is part of our cultural values until my dad's like, I know you really wanted a boy. When in reality, he was really happy having a daughter. But because that was a cultural value I had heard about and seen about in many things, that I assumed that was how my father felt, when in reality it wasn't. So here's a question. What is something really important for me to understand to be a better friend to somebody who might come from a different culture and might be experiencing dating violence? What are some ways that we can bring this topic up with someone? I think that's important. How can we, you know, be a better friend? It may be hard for that person to accept that it is dating. You're right, it takes time. And I think part of what we learn is often to say, you know what, just giving gentle reminders about being able to say, you deserve better, and when you're ready, I'm here to support you. Know that it takes time for folks to leave or to realize that their relationship is unhealthy. I think it's important to ask questions, and I think coming from a framework of help me understand what honor may mean to you. Help me understand why you feel like you can't go to your parents to talk about this. Help me understand what your fears are. So I think those are important things to be able to get across. And you can bring up some differences that you've noticed in a polite manner. And I think it's one thing to say, hey, I heard in your culture that this is what you believe. That can be very presumptive and could really get somebody defensive, because you don't want folks to have to defend their culture, because there might be parts of their culture that they really love and respect, and they don't want to have to feel like that you're judging their culture, but just trying to keep an open mind. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. I know Aisha's trying to get in. Jenna or someone else, if y'all can help her be able to get access to audio, that would be great. So when we talk about dating violence in immigrant communities, part of it's the isolation. Aisha, are you there?
Here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you want to jump in here,
Yeah.
or do you want me to?
Where are we starting off?
We're at dating violence in immigrant communities, so how isolation might play out.
Okay. All right. So hi everyone. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm just gonna jump in and start talking about how dating violence can show up in immigrant communities. Let me see if I can share my screen with everyone.
No, go ahead and use mine, since I already have it up.
You do have it up?
I think I have it up. Hopefully y'all can see this. Do y'all see the screen?
I can't see anything. I don't know. Is everyone else seeing the screen? I mean, if everyone is, then that's great.
Oh, y'all aren't seeing the screen? All right, so we had technical difficulties here then.
Okay, so let me see if I can share. Do you want to share, partner, or do you want me to?
I'm sorry. Can y'all see it now?
Ah, yeah.
Okay. I am so sorry. I thought it was up. Okay, now we're there.
Okay, so
I'll get to the right screen and we can share this later on. I'm sorry, y'all. We had technical difficulties. Here we go.
all right. So there are some ways where some of these issues are the same in non-immigrant communities, but there are unique ways where they do present in immigrant communities. So I do want to say that with isolation, it can look like preventing their partners from learning English, or it can look like preventing their partner, the abusive partners, preventing their partner from like socializing or seeing people that are from their own culture. And then with intimidation, it can look like normal intimidation, like giving threats, or it can be withholding important documents such as visas, identification documents. And this is really important when you're dealing with immigrant communities, because this is their like life, their lifeboat, their life jacket when they're living in the US and they don't have permanent immigration status. Regarding threats, these can be related to deportation, like making threats that I'm going to deport you if you report me, or withholding support for when you're making an application. So when someone is putting an application for a visa in the US, usually you need a support person, a person that signs on as the person that is going to support you in America. So they can say, oh, I'm going to withhold that and I'm not going to apply for you. And this is often a common abuse factor that we see at Raksha with our clients. And these can be also aimed at other people besides a primary survivor. So it can be aimed at the partner's children, the partner's family members. So it's not only just the partner that it can be aimed at. Manipulation regarding immigration. This one goes together with the intimidation and threats. And it's another common scenario we see at Raksha. Partners will escalate situations that go beyond their threats. So they'll actually withdraw their support or not file for immigration papers for their partner. They'll also manipulate their partners by lying that if you report me, you're going to lose your immigration status or citizenship if you report me to the authorities. Let's see. And the last one is financial abuse. So what we have seen of this at Raksha is usually when our abusive partner attempts to get their partner fired from their job by making threats, saying that, oh, I'm going to tell them you're undocumented or you don't have the immigration status necessary to work. And this financial abuse is an attempt to isolate their partners financially and socially. Regarding undocumented immigrants, so these people face an additional amount of barriers. First of all, social isolation, because they fear that they're going to be deported if they report or seek support for the dating violence. Also, cultural belief holding them back, and lack of information or financial resources to even seek help and support. I see that someone said that they can't see the screen. Let me see if I can share. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me see if I can share the.
Yeah, mine's not working. It won't even come up.
Yeah, mine either. It was showing before, and it's weird. Let's see. Okay. I think I can share it. And let me do.
We are seeing it now. Thank you, Aisha.
Oh, no problem. And is everyone able to see it right?
I think so. Now you have to double click on it, right?
Is it okay? Like it's showing the whole screen?
Yes, so you can go ahead. Everything looks great. Folks who are watching, you can double click on the video to maximize it.
Okay. I'm double clicking, but it's not. Let me see. I'm sorry, you guys.
It's up there. You're good. It's up there.
Okay. All right. So the next thing we need to consider in regards to immigrant communities and dating violence would be, let's see if I can bring it up, you guys. Okay. Arranged, forced, or early child marriages. These can show up with dating violence in the way of, if, for example, I can give an example of a teen. So South Asian teen, for example, was discovered by their parents, they're dating, and that's something that's not their cultural norm. Their parents can send back, we've seen this case before, sending back the child back to the heritage country, home country, and forcing their child to get into a arranged forced marriage when they're below the age of 18. And that has happened in the past. Something to keep in mind, though, is that it's not just related to immigrant communities when we're talking about arranged, forced, or early child marriages. This is something that has been shown in the US as well with cults where forced early marriages happen. So I just wanted everyone to keep their minds open. We already have discussed honor violence. There's also the implications around defects when sometimes some immigrant teens might not want to share what's going on with them at home or going on around anything involving the parents, like maybe the parents are being abusive because they're scared of defects being involved, and or their parents' immigration status is being impacted if their parents are not citizen holders. And that brings me to my next point. The abuser is not always an intimate partner. So when we're discussing violence at home, it can also involve parents, siblings, other family members, extended family members that could be all part of the abuse. All right, let's see. Okay, so this slide is showing just what a galaxy of an individual born outside the US looks like. So if you can see in the center, it's the person. And then in the outer circle are children, partner, family of origin, and in-laws. And then the broader circle is just like the local community, school, work. And then we go out to the orange circle. It's state laws, federal laws, immigration laws. And then in the final circle is spirituality, gender, culture, class, sexual orientation, race. So I just wanted to be able to provide you guys a just a visual to see what impacts a person that is born outside the US. All right, so the next slide, Lavanya is going to be talking to you about some sample cases and working together with you guys on finding an answer.
Yes, great. So let me read this case study, which is about this young 15-year-old girl by name Tara, who has come from a traditional Hindu family. Tara is a US citizen while her parents are on a visa. Tara's parents have lived in the US for the past 18 years and work in tech-related companies. Recently, Tara has started dating a fellow student at school. You, as her friend, have noticed that since Tara has started dating, her self-confidence has gone down and that she has been distracted lately. Tara discloses to you that her parents have been criticizing and commenting on her grades and also her looks. Tara also states that her parents sometimes hit her when her grades are not satisfactory to the parents. Think about this case and tell me if you were her friend and she was talking to you about her current situation, how best could you support her? And you can put these comments, your comments in the chat window.
While we're waiting for these comments to begin, I do want to give you a heads up. This is our 2-minute call. We packed a lot of information into a small amount of time, so if we don't get to all of this, we're going to connect our attendees with our teenscene@padv.org email so that we can connect you all to share the rest of this information.
Sure. So I'll jump in and feed into some of the comments that I will anyway make, listening without judgment. I think it's also that there are several things that are happening simultaneously for Tara and also for her parents. And I think my fellow colleagues also realize this, having worked with South Asian population, we come with a history of where patriarchy operates a lot. But I think Tara really needs attention. I think as a friend, if there is counseling and mental health support that she needs, perhaps one needs to encourage her to take that. It's also about looking at what are her family dynamics that is playing out, how is her relationship dynamics with the with what she has started in her life, how healthy is that? And I think if you can move to the next slide, Aisha, it is about providing support, it's about encouraging counseling, and it is also about being there as a non-judgmental friend. Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to go on to the next one, Lavanya?
So if you want to wrap it up, I think we have 2 minutes. So, you know, we can probably take questions and wrap this up.
Yes. So we've only got a couple of minutes to wrap up. And again, folks, we're happy to connect you with these amazing speakers. Aisha, I will let you put in a few final words, and then we have to say goodbye, but take it away.
Okay. All right, you guys, I am so sorry that we're having to wrap it up. So what can you do as a friend to someone that is going through dating violence and they are from a different culture from yours? The first point would be just developing intercultural awareness. So when you're doing that, the first thing would be admitting that you don't know, and that's perfectly fine. And the second step would be developing an awareness that of your own views, assumptions, and beliefs, and how these are influenced by your own culture. And then the next step would be take an interest in other cultures. And then the final step would be just don't make any judgments. When you have collected the information, start to check your assumptions that you're making, and use empathy when you're using, when you're trying to filter in information. The next thing would be also learn from the survivors themselves what is and isn't normal in their culture, instead of assuming and generalizing. And that plays into discovering information, and also making sure you're checking your judgment. And if something is going on with your friend and you feel really concerned about their safety, I would advise you guys to reach out to a teacher, a school social worker, or a community leader that you trust, and consider asking them for resources or assistance to make sure that you can provide the best support to your friend. Let's see. And so these are some things that you can say to a survivor. Some of these examples on the right side are examples that what you should not say. On the left side are examples you can say. So you're safe now. I'm sorry it happened to you. It wasn't your fault. And I think these kind of statements can also be used in general situations, even if someone isn't from a different culture from you. And lastly, this is something that you can think about when helping a friend safety plan if they are in a violent situation. So consider whether the survivor's family knows about the situation, about the relationship. Have them write down a list of important phone numbers in case their phone is taken away from them. So if there's an immigration attorney, interpreter, anything that they need, make sure that they have that written down. When forming a plan, make sure they have access to the important documents, and identify adults that you can trust and understand, respect the survivor's culture. And that's it. I'm sorry. I know I'm breezing through, but here are some resources that you can check in case you need to get some more information about helping a friend that is going through dating violence. And I'm sure you will get this information through PADV through email if needed. And if you need a Raksha, please feel free to call. We are here Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Thank you so much. And those were such wonderful points. And I hate that we have to say goodbye so quickly. But thank you all for being with us today. I think this is such important information. And it's okay to acknowledge that sometimes you just don't know. And it's okay to ask and have these resources. So all, thank you so very much. Again, if you have any questions and you would like to be connected with these incredible speakers, please email us at teenseen@padv.org. We're going to take a quick intermission and then part 2. So our session ACT workshops will begin in 5 minutes.